a ruler is brutally assassinated, burned to death in full view of his loyal followers. This may sound like an excerpt from a Game of Thrones, but it in fact describes a murder most foul that occurred in Ultima Online on August 9th, 1997. I'm talking, of course, about the famous Assassination of Lord British. It's referenced as an iconic slice of early online gaming, but how did a random player manage to beat a legendary game developer at his own game, and why was it so widely reported at the time? Well, let's get into it.
I am pleased to see you so brave and continue to say there's something where you're about to take on. Boy, I'm having pain something. I want to get it right.
The victim of the assassination was, of course, Lord British, a character controlled by Richard Garriott, the creator of the Ultima franchise and founder of its developer, Origin Systems. Lord British represented Garriott in much the same way the Avatar, protagonist of the Ultima franchise, represented the player. You see, in Ultima lore, both Lord British and the Avatar are actually from Earth, but they travel to the fictional world of Caesarea through a magical portal called a Moongate. Now, Garriott was at the time nothing short of PC gaming royalty. His persona had more in common with the lead singer of a rock band than the creative director of a modern game studio. Admittedly, a nerdy rock band, but you get the point. Every PC gamer knew his name and every game developer looked up to him. Naturally, Garriott's persona was no pushover. A skilled knight, he was generally invincible and undefeatable in the Ultima games, though players had found ways to kill Lord British in single-player Ultima games through exploits, bugs, or specific combinations of skills. Ultima Online would prove no different. Lord British was supposed to be invincible, of course, but a mistake left him vulnerable to damage. This happened thanks to a server crash. Some say the crash had occurred days earlier, though the source of this information is a little unclear. Starlong, the director of Ultima Online, had a different take, saying the crash occurred about an hour before the murder. Garriott has yet another take, saying his invulnerability was inactive due to a server wipe 6 months prior. Lord British had been invulnerable for some time, according to him, but no one had tried to assassinate him. I do suspect his memory is not quite right on this, though, as the timing doesn't seem to quite line up well with the beta's release. While Lord British was the victim of this assassination, Garriott himself was the target of a real-world stalker just a few months prior. A fan had climbed his fence, thrown a rock through his window, and made it halfway up the stairs to the second floor before Garriott, packing an Uzi, an Uzi, fired a warning shot. Now, after the in-game murder, some of the staffers, they shouted through the hall, "Richard is dead," in surprise, and others who weren't in the room with Richard Garriott thought that maybe the stalker had struck again and that Richard Garriott had, in fact, been murdered. The truth was quite a bit less nefarious, though also perhaps a little more embarrassing for Origin Systems. On August 9th, 1997, during the second phase of Ultima Online's beta, the developers decided to put Lord British on a celebrity tour of the realm. This was a special event, but not unusual. The developers would often interact with players to entertain them or carry out punishment on those breaking the rules. Lord British was joined by Starlong's character, Lord Blackthorn, and was escorted by two jesters, known as Chuckles and Heckles. And they were played by Origin programmers Scott Phillips and Jeff Posey. The crime occurred at Castle Blackthorn, which of course was owned by Lord Blackthorn, and the arrival of Lord British was not officially scheduled. He had been spotted in the world and players guessed he would make an appearance at Lord Blackthorn's castle. Dozens of players showed up, and while that may not sound very significant by modern standards, it had the intended effect of stressing Ultima Online's early servers. The lag was so bad, in fact, that players could barely move their characters. As Lord British was welcoming the crowd, a field of fire spell appeared on the rampart where British, Blackthorn, Chuckles, and Heckles stood. Chuckles and Heckles had already moved further away from the Lords and they weren't caught in the fire, but the Lords were squarely in the field. Now, at first, Lord British didn't move. Garriott knew he should be invincible. But he also soon noticed he was taking damage, so quickly he moved out of the fire. It was, however, too late. The damage had already occurred, and probably due to server lag, British died moments after walking out of the fire. Lord Blackthorn also stood in the fire, but as his invulnerability flag was properly set, he didn't come to any harm. After a stunned silence and shouts of, "Oh my god," and "he died," both from the in-game crowd and the developers at Origin, Lord Blackthorn retaliated by spawning 4 powerful demons. The lag left players completely defenseless, and the demons quickly cleared out the crime scene, killing most players present. Castle Blackthorn was soon strewn with dozens of bodies, but only one belonged to the culprit. So, who was the rogue that slayed the in-game persona of gaming royalty? It was, of course, this guy, the shirtless man in a kilt. This is Reigns. Now, I'm not precisely sure when he joined the game, but he did say in an interview published August 19th that he had played Ultima Online for about 3 weeks. That would mean he joined the game shortly after the start of the second beta, which began in mid-July. Reigns, who spoke with Online Gaming Review after the assassination, said his guild viewed Lord British as, quote, the ultimate wielder of tyrannical rule. But role-playing was not the only motive, as Reigns says in that same interview. Players had tried to kill Lord British in every Ultima he had ever appeared in, so Reigns figured, hey, why not give it a go in Ultima Online? Now, the murder, it wasn't premeditated. The shirtless Reigns came poorly equipped to attack Lord British, as the character was not a skilled mage or archer. But he was a thief, so he began pickpocketing nearby characters and soon found his weapon, a scroll of Firefield. He cast it without much expectation that it would work, so he was as surprised as anyone when the ruler of Ultima Online slumped to the ground. Reigns booked it out of the area. Screenshots of the event taken by Razimus Gaming appear to show the shirtless, kilted Reigns at the front of a panicked crowd of players fleeing Lord Blackthorn's castle. Lag made it difficult for the players to control their characters, however, and soon everyone present, including Reigns, was slain. Reigns was in real life controlled by a 23-year-old man from Indianapolis, Indiana, who worked as an internet software consultant. As it turns out, the man who played Reigns was a bit of a troublemaker. Another of his characters, Aquaman, was implicated in killing hundreds, yes, hundreds of players in cold blood. This reign of terror had put him on Origin's radar and would lead to consequences for Reigns, not to mention plenty of controversy in the Ultima Online community. The assassination of Lord British was not taken lightly by Origin. Lord Blackthorn soon announced a total ban of Reigns and all other characters controlled by the player, including not just in Ultima Online, but, quote, all further Origin World Online games. The ban was paired with the accusation that Reigns and his other character, Aquaman, had used exploits to kill players. Now, Reigns doesn't seem to have addressed this allegation directly, instead saying Origin decided that his style of play was not permitted. This, I think, was an early salvo in a war that would come to define Ultima Online's first few years, the battle between the PKs, that's player killers, and the Care Bears. Ultima Online released with lax rules for PvP combat and item ownership. Players could attack each other just about anywhere and could loot just about anything from fallen foes. Origin hoped to create a world with politics and epic wars, and it did lead to some great stories, but Reigns was a hint at the chaos to come. Origin would make numerous efforts to dissuade PKs, starting with a flag that marked murderers in red and opened them to attack, and that evolved into increasingly elaborate virtue and bounty systems. Now, eventually, Origin just gave up and split the world of Ultima into PvE and PvP facets with the release of Ultima's second expansion, Renaissance, in 2000. Starlong's decision to slay everyone at the scene of the crime also drew criticism and exposed another problem for Ultima Online, operating a persistent world as a commercial service. Ultima Online was successful at a scale never seen before, and this would come to change the relationship between the game's developers and the players. Star, Garriott, and others at Origin saw their response to the assassination as just a good bit of fun, but players, they saw it as overreach. The relationship between developers and players was becoming less personal and just more professional. Now, what about Reigns, the person who kicked this all off? If he ever made his way back to Ultima Online, well, he kept a pretty low profile. Aside from a few interviews after the assassination, the player behind Reigns seemed to accept the ban and just move on. Perhaps it makes sense that Reigns would fade away, as the style of gameplay he embraced had fallen out of favor. While there are notable exceptions like EVE Online or Mortal Online, most MMOs have taken away the choice to participate in open-world PvP entirely, and no longer allow direct interaction between the developers and the players. The assassination of Lord British was very much an event of its era, and one that's unlikely to occur in any game you'll find today. Thanks for taking the time to make it to the end of this video. I want to give a specific shout out to Razimus Gaming, which I mentioned earlier, and I've linked to one of his videos below. Razimus was present when the assassination went down, and he's gone to the trouble of keeping the screenshots of the murder available online. And if you have any new information about this dastardly murder, you were there, you just want to give your thoughts on what went down, please leave a comment. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.